I have been sick and tired of traditional boxy CS maps for many years now. Yeah, they work and competitively are the most viable, but gameplay is so predictable. As a more casual player, I love unconventional layouts. Each having something unique keeps me coming back to them, even if it's hostage mode. But there is one very popular map that was never made official with a long history of ups and downs, which despite being traditional, just does things differently, and is probably my favorite Defuse map of all time. This is Tuscan. Christopher Audi, a prominent CS level designer we all know and love, having made many popular official maps, was commissioned by Cyber Athlete Professional League in 2001 to make a competitively viable map for their lineup. The result was DE Clan 1 Mil or DE CPL Mil. I have no idea why this discrepancy exists, both are exactly the same. Well, he made two, the second one being CPL Fire, but that's not important right now. The name Mill is perhaps because this is a storage facility of a milling factory. It's a very cumbersome map for many reasons. First off, a lot of positive quirks. The midsection is iconic with the slope where you only see heads peeking, the very wide open A side full of crates on the sides creating hiding places and corners, B banana peeking into the T lobby, the tedious underground connecting all the way to B site, and something.
The Phantom, exterior like fish eggs, interior like suicide wrist red.
Anyway, I remember playing it a lot, great for 32 people servers, but there are some things that puzzle me and I find weird even back then. This part being blocked off was always infuriating, this staircase is unnecessarily complicated, and nobody really used it when there's a ladder right next to B site. It was still hard to get to as opposed to the way easier A site. As a result, it may have been a bit CT-sided and wasn't often played in tournaments. Regardless, Mill was still overall popular, so much so other tournament organizers wanted to have it, but because of copyright and not being up for rent, there really wasn't a way to obtain the Mill. That's where Tuscan comes in, because in order to evade the law, you only need to copy the most important bits and change the name. Boy, were there a lot of changes, for the better. So as we may know, Brute Maps, a prominent community mapper I've talked about before, was commissioned by Civo to recreate Mill in 2005, this time without binding it to copyright and changing the setting to something very ambiguous. Could be Middle Eastern, North African, as usual, but who knows. Bayside is no longer on a second floor, but still retains a balcony along with the bridge and banana. Short is new as an alternative pathway with a window to defend from. A-side and mid are relatively the same, with underground now exiting to a door and no longer extending to B. I still think it's a bit long, but much better. Side note, banners and advertisements are typical, but it always baffled me why this subway image is here, maybe as a joke? Anyway, Tuscan is way more balanced and was a success for professional play. Maybe not to a degree of being mandatory because map pools back then were typically small, sticking to classics. Meanwhile, community servers were slowly adopting Tuscan instead of Mill. Rightfully so. I think this first version is almost on par with other competitive staples. Later got ported to CSORs where it continued to thrive for years to come. A few boxes were tweaked here and there, everything else is the same. For fans of Mill, it did receive a one-to-one port by Dark Nova Cross, looking a lot more like a milling factory, but I'm not sure if this was again commissioned by CPL. It was featured in some of their CSS tournaments, so perhaps, but I cannot confirm. Eventually, when CSGO came around, things were a bit uncertain. Valve picked up the rights to Mirage and made it official, another map that was originally owned by CPL. Maybe there was hope for Tuscan, yet it remained absent. And why was that? I think the problem wasn't the map itself. You see, Mirage got picked up because all iterations were made by Bubkes. Tuscan is somewhat of a fan remake, and this is where it gets murky. Taking an existing level and transforming it into something similar but with a different name may not necessarily necessarily violate copyright per se, but when it comes to someone else purchasing the rights to said remake is rather difficult to ascertain. So if Valve wanted to buy the rights, who do they pay and how does any of this even work? Does a cut go to CPL? That wouldn't exactly be possible because the org was bought in 2008 by Wulong Ventures of Singapore, so while copyright of the original mill may still stand, the entity behind it is rather non-existent. Alright, I'm not a lawyer, so let's move on from these shenanigans to something more interesting. After being supposedly commissioned by Sivo again, Brute Maps gave Tuscan the CSGO upgrade with help from other community members, and despite stylistically maintaining a similar theme, it's not a one-to-one copy. Certain areas have been tweaked, but sad to say this version, despite not being bad, didn't attain the same popularity. Hype was there at its release, but quickly fizzled out. I believe this mostly comes down to design choices. Visually, while looking nice, it's rather cluttered and detail is unnecessary. This leads to most areas feeling stuffed, if that makes any sense. To a lesser degree, it stuck too hard to the original layout, lacking anything fresh. I guess it wasn't Colin's calling, considering he has a life and job elsewhere, which made meeting the expectations for this highly anticipated classic tough, to say the least. And for a bit, this did lead to some drama over this version being bad, and the ownership dispute, since Brute didn't invent Tuscan, which meant he doesn't have the rights to sell, and if he didn't want to work on it, then anyone can make their own version without his approval. It's all too dumb and convoluted. Draw your own conclusions. Point is, in the end, Brute needed someone else more dedicated to CS mapping for another shot, and chose Cat Food to save the day. Work began, and after beta testing, the remake was finally here. Sporting a fresh Italian skin with colorful buildings and further layout optimizations. The underground is shorter, the palette is unified, every part is easy and makes sense. I mean, look at the walls and ground, full of models instead of a flat texture. Peak Tuscan. The endeavor paid off, eventually becoming official as part of the temporary rotation, and you bet I played the hell out of it. Okay, now that we are here, let me explain why I love it so much. First, its layout is a standard 3-lane design. Simple, right? One immediately noticeable thing is the small size, and if you've ever played Tuscan, be it the 1.6 version or this one, fights can happen almost instantly. And I don't mean just sniper duels on mid, but instant action. I adore this kind of quick and snappy gameplay. Aggression works both ways, and nowhere is safe. You can capture mid, then decide to rotate B, or vice versa. Same with post-plant situations. Wrapping around the bomb sites is easy. And speaking of bomb sites, they have this unconventional design to them. One is large and open, the other is small and cluttered. Overall, think of the best parts of Dust 2 combined with Nuke without the verticality, if that makes any sense. But my personal opinions aside, what did everyone else think? Has Tuscan been modernized and ready to finally become an adopted staple like Mirage? Well, while many liked it and just needed time to adapt and learn, from a more critical standpoint, it's been pointed out that having to check too many positions creates uncertainty and makes pushing science difficult or retakes tedious to deal with. Generally just frustration that core issues have not been addressed in its design, because it's not like the old Tuscan wasn't like this, but why was it popular in tournaments and places like ESEA years ago? Different time, standards, and meta. If Tuscan wants to be accepted today and be on par to the likes of Anubis or Cash, it needs to do better. It's been 20 years since Tuscan's original release, and despite initial praise, spent many years floundering around, making people wonder if it's forgotten, and if there ever will be a good version to break this curse of constantly being on the cusp of joining the greats. I think it's possible, because as of right now, the map's ownership is not within Brute or Cat Food's hands anymore. There was an API leak mentioning a purchase, despite all of the aforementioned legal issues, and since Anubis is also mentioned, which seems to be pretty much owned by Valve, the leak might be real. From here on, time will tell what's gonna happen. Will Tuscan simply be ported, or a new rework addressing the issues? In the event a purchase didn't happen, will Brute and Cat Food even work on a CS2 version? Funny how we're back to square one with things being as uncertain as ever. You know me though, I am as optimistic as always and will be patiently waiting for its return once more. I only didn't want to wait God knows how long to see if it will come to CS2 before making this video. In the end, I just wanted to spread my love and to tell a story. Oh, by the way, I've noticed there's a big pile of dust behind my bed. Jeez, no wonder I've been sneezing constantly with my nose leaking like a river dam. I better go take care of that.